you get the impression that the left has been just stealing money from the government for years. I don't mean money, I mean hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions. I think whatever your feelings are about Africa, everybody agrees on one thing. It's not working. It's too violent, it's too corrupt, and it's destroying the infrastructure that they inherited, and they cannot sustain it.
Hello, ladies. Hello, gentlemen. I'm laughing because Victor's telling jokes. Jack Fowler. I'm the host of the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Welcome to it. We are recording on Monday, the 10th of March. This episode is up on March 13th. We're approaching the infamous Ides. Victor. Victor is the Martin and Ely Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College, where he's just come from. He survived it. He's here to share his wisdom. He's got a website, The Blade of Perseus. VictorHanson.com is the address. Lots to talk about today with Victor. Student loans, Trump removing the security clearance for Perkins Cove, Trump killing aid to South Africa over its now rampant anti-white racism, John Kerry exposed for undermining FBI investigations into Iranian terrorists. Maybe he belongs in jail. At least for this bad plastic surgery, he belongs in jail. Pop-up nonprofits, a real problem that we are seeing in the abuse of the 501c3 tax code by leftists to line the pockets of their pals. So much to get Victor's wisdom on, and we will get to that when we come back from these important messages. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor, my friend, I'm glad you're still in the saddle here. Today we recorded earlier, but he's plugging through. Victor, I think it'd be wrong for me to say Donald Trump kiboshed the public service student loan program, but he has. By the way, the concept now that public servants who now make more money than your average American deserve to have their loans forgiven, their student loans forgiven after 10 years. I mean, gosh, my wife and I were suckers for for sending our kids to a state school where they could have gone to Holy Cross or something like that. I'm just glad that there's some Trumpianness being brought to this issue. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, nobody in their right mind thought the student loan program would balloon to $1.7 trillion. I think 30% of the loans, especially after COVID, are non-performing. And, it's directly correlated with two unfortunate developments in higher education. Number one, the average person that does graduate, it takes 6 years, not 4. Half the people who enroll in college drop out and don't get any degrees. And third, the universities have raised their costs higher than the rate of inflation because they have a guaranteed source of cash, and that's the federal government that backs these loans for students. And the only way you're ever going to get out of the problem is you're going to have to tell the universities and colleges you're going to have to deal with the private sector, and we suggest that you put your endowments up as collateral. And then think of if you were going to Stanford University or Harvard or Yale or Duke, and you were pre-law, pre-medicine, you're going to be making $1 million 1 year perhaps, and you say to them, I'm just going to take 6 or 8 units. No, you're not. You're not going to take 6 or 8 units. You're going, and I had some trouble after I graduated, and that gender studies major, I can't get a job, so I'll pay you back when I can. No, you're not. No, you're not. In other words, there would be accountability. If those universities had to guarantee those loans when they defaulted, then they would advise the students about which majors were remunerative. They want you to get out of college as quickly as possible in 4 years, and they want you to graduate. And they would expedite that. But there's
They
no
wouldn't
moral.
have
The
as
moral
big a,
hazard is just not there.
they would also not have as big an administrative staff.
They wouldn't. I don't know what the Wall Street Journal defined as administrators, but not long ago they said there were 16,000 graduate students and undergraduate at Stanford, and 15,000 administrative staff people, one for one. But and then Joe Biden, when he tried to counsel him, right before the midterms, he had that habit of draining the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and canceling student loans and trying to say that he was going to legalize marijuana for the youth vote. Well, the Supreme Court, Nancy Pelosi says, unfortunately, Joe, you can't do that. It's against the law. It's just to give amnesties on loans and break those contracts. And then he did anyway, and it went through the courts, and the Supreme Court ruled against him. Remember when he was still a candidate? He said, and I found a way around it. All you people who believe that Donald Trump is violating statutes and we're in a quote-unquote constitutional crisis should remember what Joe Biden did. He bragged to the nation that he would find a workaround the Supreme Court ruling that said no president can arbitrarily cancel a student loan. And then you've got the issue that 60% of the people are not getting bachelor's degrees, and you're asking them as taxpayers to subsidize those who do. And there's an increasing cultural divide between people who are in school, in the universities, and people who are not. And the old argument for universities is with the general education program, the people who leave the universities are better educated, better read, more enlightened citizens that take their citizenship more seriously. No. I think everybody realizes that if you're 25 and you've been a master electrician for 3 years, or you're a plumber, you know more about the world than somebody that's out at Columbia University screaming and yelling in pro-Hamas fashion. That's a caricature, but the real world teaches people much better. The university is not this university of the 1950s and early 60s, and it's really hard to justify the number of people that are in college because these courses are not there. They're not reading Shakespeare in Shakespeare courses. They're not reading English literature. They're not reading history. They're not doing it. The course titles may remain the same.
You're not learning Greek and...
No, they dropped the Greek requirement at Princeton University because they felt it was too exclusionary. Everything is exclusionary. If you think about it, everyone, DEI is the most toxic idea because ultimately it's entirely nihilistic. It can make the argument that there's unfairness in every aspect of our lives, and therefore the government has a right and it has the power to address that inequity and with diversity, equity, and inclusion. But they want it. It's so funny. They want to make the United States in a way that if you made the NFL or the NBA that way, they would go crazy. If you said to the NFL and NBA, you're one of the most lucrative, prestigious, remunerative institutions in America, more people watch you. If you make it to the NFL, you're going to be a multi-millionaire with endorsements. But it's just not diverse. It isn't. I mean, 12% of the population is African American, and maybe 65 to 70% are represented on NFL rosters. I'm sorry, it's just not diverse. And it's not inclusionary because there's a lot of wonderful Asian people and poor whites and Hispanics. Why don't you have some, Cambodian tight ends and maybe some Hispanic quarterbacks? Why don't Roman Gabriel, I remember him, he was great. So let's have quotas. And then, of course, people say that nobody would want to watch it. They want the best. Yes, exactly. They want the best people on the field. And you can find ways of determining that, can't you? Merit. Well, you can't find out merit. That's just a construct. Well, it's a construct if you're on the left, if you're talking about air traffic controllers. But it's real if you're defending the NFL for being not racially diverse. So people in the NFL believe that they have mechanisms to find the best people to make the most interesting games with the highest accomplished athletes. And the same thing is true with airline pilots or nuclear control people. You can find the best people through test and experience and stuff.
I was always curious about you and Victor when you talk about sports, given that you were a farmer and teacher. I wonder when you ever had time to watch the NFL on a Sunday.
I used to once in a while. I wasn't but between 1980 and 84, almost for 5 years, I didn't do anything else, Jack. I got a PhD right before I turned 26. I'd written a book, but I didn't think I was ever going to go into academia again. So I was farming 180 acres with my brother and cousin. And I was exhausted every day because we didn't have any hired men. It was us. So I did most of the herbicide spraying, and I did a lot of the labor problem. And my other brother did a lot of the pesticide stuff, and we pruned, we tied vines, we did a lot of the to save money. But we'd get home at night, we were just exhausted. But on Sunday, I would watch football. I used to, 1980, 81, 82, 83, my favorite quarterback of all time was Jim Plunkett. Yeah. He was a wonderful guy, man. He was at Stanford, and my dad and mom took me up there and watched him, and he almost beat USC. He was a wonderful guy. He was a noble person. I think his parents were, no, I never did. I did run out there when I don't know how old I was, maybe an 8th grade or a freshman. We went to the Stanford USC game, and I ran out there and yelled his name, got close to him. Oh, I did meet him in the Bank of America in Stanford Shopping Center once. Said hello to him. He didn't know who I was because I was of no interest, but he was a great person too. And he took I think he played for the Buffalo Bills before he went to the Raiders and 49ers.
He played for the Patriots too.
Yeah. Boston Patriots, and they really beat him up. He was sacked. And he was like he was like some kind of rock, or statue. He would just stand there, and these guys he was about 6'3", solid muscle, and these guys would just take shots at him and bounce off. And then he had that razor arm. It was just like a laser. He was a great player. So I watched all that, and then I lost interest in it. I couldn't, I got it writing, and
it's only 24 hours in a day.
I don't have the time. And football changed too. It became too blitzy and all this take the knee. I couldn't get into all that.
Yeah. Well, performance art began there, I think, actually. Victor, again, at the risk of harming our listeners by having me read more, I just want to give a little clip here from Donald Trump's executive order killing security clearance for Perkins Coie Fusion GPS, the law firm. Here's the core section. I'm just thrilled that he's doing this. This is an executive order. The dishonest and dangerous activity of the law firm Perkins Co. LLP has affected this country for decades, notably in 2016 while representing failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Perkins Co. hired Fusion GPS, which then manufactured a false dossier designed to steal an election. This egregious activity is part of a pattern. Perkins Co. has worked with activist donors, including George Soros, to judicially overturn popular, necessary, and democratically enacted election laws, including those requiring voter identification. In one such case, a court was forced to sanction Perkins Co's attorneys for an unethical lack of candor before the court. Victor, there's plenty more in this executive order, but Donald Trump has kneecapped security clearance for this firm, and security clearance is pretty damn important for big Washington law firms.
Yeah, I don't understand it, why they get any at all. They're kind of dumping grounds for rotating top military with law degrees or diplomats with law degrees. They go back out there and then they go on television, or they bat their eyes and say, my sources tell me, or I have inside knowledge, because they have security clearances. Why do they need them? I don't think they need them at all. I don't think that, National Security Advisor Waltz or Secretary of State Rubio or Secretary of Defense Hexas that said, we've got to get a coherent policy toward Ukraine. I know what we need to do. Get those guys over from Perkins Coie. Get them over here. They've got security clearance. Call up Clapper. Call up Brennan. Those guys really, call up some of the former generals. Maybe they can give us an insight. They keep up. I don't think that's going to work like that. They don't need to. And remember, Perkins Coie, it was one of 4 links to hide the fingerprints of Hillary Clinton in something that was really illegal. It's against the law for a presidential candidate to pay money to a foreign national to work as in their campaign. So she had the DNC give money to Perkins Coie, who gave money to Fusion GPS, who gave money to Christopher Steele. And they had basically from Hillary to the DNC to Perkins Coie to Fusion GPS to Steele, 4 paywalls. And it was all to hide Hillary Clinton's connection with the Russian collusion farce and the dossier farce. And the irony was he was also being paid at the same time to be a informant for the FBI under James Comey. So I'm glad that he's doing this. I wish they would lift a lot more of these security clearances. They're too promiscuous. And you just go into these cable TV shows and listen to these people start to pontificate, and and they'll give you some kind of indication that they have sources, and you're supposed to understand it's from a security clearance. And we have too many of them out there. We need to really restrict the flow of knowledge. So the more that he can deny these to all sorts of people, especially if they have interfered in an election as they did. Everybody said, election denialism. No, it was election interferism in 2000, interfering in 2016. And we forget about that Hillary Clinton hired a foreign national to try to warp the election. And in 2020, according to Molly Ball in her Time magazine, February 2021 essay, that's exactly what they did again. They interfered in an election. They had Mark Zuckerberg give $419 million. They modulated the protest on the street. She said that they censored misinformation and disinformation. That was a code word for the FBI partnering with Twitter to suppress information to voters. So there's been too much of that, and they need to clean it up. That's what Trump is doing.
Right. But there's not only, I think, what he did in this, it's that he did it. If a typical, let's say even good Republican conservative had run for president and been elected, this wouldn't have happened. Only Trump would do this.
No, if it had, let's say if they did it to Mitt Romney, remember how Candy Crawley tried to rig that debate when he was trying to argue?
She didn't try, she did.
She did.
Yeah.
And then she said, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. It wasn't terrorism. It was, there was a film guy did it. That's why the riots cost. It was a right-wing filmmaker. It wasn't. And Mitt Romney said, no, may I object? Well, he never followed that up. Nobody in the Romney campaign said that they were rigging the election. They didn't care. Any other Republican would have had a committee of sober and judicious experts, and they would have said, let's refer this questions about security clearances and come back in 6 months.
Yes. Well, happy day.
That's not who Trump is, for good or evil. When he's building some big high-rise, he doesn't make a committee. He steamrolls opposition. He makes a deal with, roadblocks. And then he feels that the eventual product will be very good for people, and they'll overlook the messiness of the implementation and construction.
Victor, I have to spring something on you here. This is mean of me because I usually clear this ahead of time.
Why don't you give me, is it 2 Advils or Tamiflu?
I sent you this link. This is apropos of nothing other than while at Hillsdale, part of the reason you were there was to discuss war movies. This is a tweet, an X, a post, in an apparent violation of the president's DEI order, the American Battlefield Monuments Commission, which you were a commissioner on, still has a chief diversity officer who believes that DEI is quote-unquote imperative to preserve American battlefields. Can you believe that that commission had a DEI officer? Of course you can believe that.
They didn't when I was there.
No, I
but
know.
I was fired with... It's another thing that's funny. We had the 5 former defense secretaries, Secretary Austin, Secretary Mattis, Secretary Hagel, Secretary Perry, Secretary Panetta. And they said Donald Trump is firing and this is an outrage and we've never politicized the Pentagon. I'm thinking, wait. Not only did Obama fire generals and generals, many of the generals who signed one of them who signed the letter, and not only did Panetta interfere in an election and lie about the Hunter Biden authentic laptop and never apologized, but they fired all these generals, but they fired 18 people. Biden did that were on the service academy boards. Remember that? He just came in and said, you're fired. They even fired H.R. McMaster. He was on the West Point board. And I was on the American Battlefield Monuments Commission, and I just got a letter that says you will surrender your passport. They each gave us, a diplomatic passport. I never really used it. I never charged them one penny to visit. Half the American dead in World War I and World War II are buried abroad. I always, if I was overseas and I was conducting tours, I always made an effort to take a side visit to the Ham cemetery, or if I was in Tunisia, I went over and looked at the American cemetery there, same in Italy. But there was no need for diversity. What would that mean? I mean, each year there was maybe 1 or 2 people who were found, from a construction project or something. They would find the remains of an American soldier, and then they would have DNA. But the whole point of the cemeteries, there was the most rigorous standards about the Carrara marble crosses and the shape of the cross and what can be and not put on the can and cannot be put on the cross. And the whole point is these beautiful manicured cemeteries, and everybody is equal. It's not like a private cemetery where one guy has a monument and another person doesn't, or there's an angel statue or a pyramid or a monolith or an obelisk. None of that. That's the whole point, that in death, people were like they were in the army. They were all equal as the Americans. So what would a DEI person do? The only thing that I can remember about my brief tenure on the committee was that the Europeans were trying to partner with us, peace gardens. Basically, after Saving Private Ryan and the Normandy battlefield became one of the biggest tourist attractions in Europe, and of course they wanted to have out in the parking lot some kind of utopian, postmodern, war is harmful for young kids and their other living things type attitude. And we were just trying to stick to the mission statement. So the mission statement was how to ensure that the graveyards reflect the dignity and the sacrifice of American soldiers, and they keep to the mission statement as outlined in the original charter of the commission. And I'd mentioned that if Donald Trump really wanted to stop all that, then he could appoint Thomas Connor, a professor at Hillsdale, who wrote the book on the commission, the American Battlefields Commission. He wrote the entire book on it and the history of it, its operation, its value. And he's a Trump supporter. He would be a nonpartisan, but if he was the head of that commission, he would do a wonderful job. And he would ensure, I can guarantee you, there's not going to be a diversity, equity, inclusion officer in that. They have a permanent staff that was very good, but why would you need someone? What would be the purpose to do what? How would you want to bring race or gender into the operation of cemeteries abroad?
It's the Soviet way. The ideology must be everywhere and in everything. I mentioned before the chess club, the Soviet Union chess club, thought they could escape the Marxist rule, but there was no hiding. Silence is violence and all that crap. Hey, Victor, we're going to get your thoughts, speaking of racial matters, of Donald Trump's actions related to South Africa and a proposed bill by Senator Mike Rounds about U.S. land being sold to our enemies. And we're going to get Victor's thoughts on these things and more when we come back from these important messages. We'll get back to the show in a minute, but first let's talk about something that's affecting all of us. The dollar isn't as stable as it once was. Interest payments on our national debt now exceed our entire military budget, and if you're paying attention, you know traditional retirement strategies might not be enough anymore. That's why we want to tell you about American Alternative Assets. They specialize in helping investors diversify with gold, a physical asset that's preserved wealth for centuries while paper currencies have come and gone. What makes American Alternative Assets different is their simplicity. You can transfer funds from your existing retirement accounts, 401ks, or IRAs. No taxes, no penalties. If you're ready to explore gold as part of your retirement strategy, call 1-888-615-8047 or visit VictorLovesGold.com and use the code VICTOR and claim your free wealth protection guide. That's 1-888-615-8047 or visit VictorLovesGold.com and use the code VICTOR and claim your wealth protection guide that they're offering to all our listeners. We are back with the Victor Davis Hanson Show recording on the 10th of March. This episode is up on the 13th. Do remember Victor's website, The Blade of Perseus. VictorHanson.com is the web address. You have to subscribe. You have to subscribe. Why? Because if you're a fan of Victor's writings, you want to read everything he writes. And twice a week he writes ultra articles exclusively for The Blade of Perseus. He also does an exclusive video every week for the site. You'll find the archives of these podcasts, links to everything else Victor writes and does. But it's $65 a year, which is discounted from $650 monthly due. Please check it out early and often like they vote in Chicago. Victor, here's a headline from PJ Media. Trump slashes all South Africa aid, cites anti-white government policy. A quote from the article, South Africa is being terrible. This is Donald Trump's post from Donald Trump on social media. South Africa is being terrible, plus to longtime farmers in that country. They are confiscating their land and farms, and much worse than that, a bad place to be right now, and we are stopping all federal funding. To go a step further, any farmer with family, ! From South Africa seeking to flee that country for reasons of safety will be invited into the United States of America with a rapid pathway to citizenship. This process will begin immediately! There are lots of all caps in this from Donald Trump on Truth. This is a Truth Social post. Yeah, Victor, the wheels are coming off the bus there. I
it was inevitable, but because the government it's a Marxist government, and the one thing I don't understand is they have the. I understand that you had to end apartheid, and that was a good thing that it ended. And I understand Rhodesia, that became Zimbabwe, but what they did in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, was they destroyed one of the most productive per acre farming regimens in the world. And it was a big exporter of food, and it was an anchor of all of Africa. And they destroyed it by driving out all of the British farmers without compensation and harassing them and shooting them. Or they could have done it gradually, or they could have allowed them to have trainees to train Africans to help. But they just got rid of them, and then they regretted it. So South Africa looks at this, and what are they doing? They're doing exactly the same thing. And the country, I think, whatever your feelings are about Africa, everybody agrees on one thing. It's not working. Yeah. It's too violent. It's too corrupt. And it's destroying the infrastructure that they inherited, and they cannot sustain it. Donald Trump cut off all foreign aid to South Africa. And remember, South Africa is a very radical country. They always side with Hamas. They're anti-Semitic, they're anti-Israel, they're anti-American, they're anti-European. They're a very wealthy country, and it's probably the most corrupt country in the world. And but when he says some of these people have been in South Africa since the 17th century, 18th century, so they feel that they would like to stay. And even though they're only 20, they used to be 20% of the so-called white Boers and British. I think most of the British South Africans have left, but he's getting a lot of criticism for that by welcoming in people from South Africa. But it would be a immigrant that would, you bring people in who had skills, that spoke the language, and probably had capital.
I would think someone that has a 1,000-acre farm and is running it successfully. I'm not blowing smoke at you as a farmer, but you don't have 1,000. You could have a 188-acre farm, right? And it shows your skill set and value to the country you're coming to.
Yeah, but the problem that Trump will say, well, they're white. You got to remember how the left thinks. The left thinks if 85% of all immigration, legal and illegal, is non-white, that's normal. And if you were to bring in people from South Africa, that's racist. That's just how they think. And it's such a minefield that people don't talk about it, but it gets this, it's not so much about race, it's a system. The British came in there and they had that horrific Boer War with the Boers, the early Dutch, and then they had a peace, and apartheid was sort of a late phenomenon in the 30s and 40s and 50s. But my point is that they had this system of free market capitalism, a judiciary, constitutional government, and it was racist because they didn't let other people fully participate. Had they earlier done it very gradually and trained people, it might have avoided this. But nevertheless, it was a hot spot during the Cold War, so you had a lot of communist influence that were using race to make sure that South Africa was a revolutionary society on the part of the Soviet sphere, et cetera, et cetera. But why do these people who are killing the white farmers and confiscating the farm, do they ever just take just a minute, second, and say, why are their farms working and why are they so productive? Why? And what can we do to make sure that all the farms follow in that vein? What is the protocol? Is it capitalism? Is it the rule of law? Is it an independent judiciary? Is it a meritocracy? But whatever it is, we've got to emulate it because it produces more food and it cuts down on disease and starvation. But they don't think like that. They don't. And that's when I never understood the squad when Omar said that she came here and she thought it was dirty or so. She remember that she said something to her father and she thought that homeless people and it wasn't that great a place. And then, this is a person who allegedly married her brother to circumvent immigration law. But she's been very critical of European colonialism and so-called white privilege and all of that. But just think away the racial compound and look at the culture. Why did they want to come here? They meaning people who were not born in the United States. Why do we have 50 million of them who were not born in the United States? What's the attraction? Why did these 12 million people want to leave their own families, their lifelong homes? Venezuela, Bolivia, Taiwan, China, mainland China, Taiwan, South Korea. What was it about this country that drew them here? And why do some people, when they come here, attack the system as racist and the people who created it as racist when they want a part of its fruition? I don't understand that. When Obrador said, I think it's a beautiful thing, 40 million Mexicans have come. Well, why didn't 40 million Americans come to Mexico?
Well, Victor, we have another agricultural-related question to raise with you, but I'm going to spring something else on you. I forgot to mention this in advance. Hunter Biden's withdrawn his lawsuit about the laptop and all the excuses.
Poor Hunter.
I know. I wanted our listeners to feel your expression of pity.
I felt terrible about it. What did he say? Did he sell 27 paintings? For like
when
55...
when Daddy was president.
Yeah, but then it was so unfair because he was doing such a great job. He was selling them based on his wonderful talent, getting 50-something thousand. And then all of a sudden it stopped because of Donald Trump, the right, MAGA, they were mean to him. Or did it have something to do with his father was no longer president? And then we learned that the little gallery that said, well, there's going to be a paywall, nobody will know who buys these, and there won't be any. That was a complete lie. That the head of the gallery has basically confessed that every single person who bought a painting of Hunter's was known to Hunter Biden and therefore to the Biden family. And that was the only thing. And then he's poor. He had his memoir. Remember, he said he sold 4,000 copies? 4,000 copies is not a lot of copies.
He was expecting a lot more income from.
And then it went down to just 1,500. So he had to drop his lawsuit. He can't sue is it the computer person that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
that
Delaware
poor guy. He wanted to harass that person, and he was getting all this money. And I think what happened to his sugar daddy friend that pays all his bills? I guess he doesn't see any utility. He was renting a home, and he says that it was burned. I don't think it was burned, but it suffered smoke damage. Here you have a person who's on the wrong side of 50, and he's probably made in his life, he's grifted or leveraged at least 20 or 30 million bucks. And where that money went, I don't know. I don't know how you can take that amount of money. You divide it among the family members, but still, he must have had 5 or 6 or 8 million. Did it all go up his nose? Did it go for prostitutes? Did it go for travel? I don't know. Divorce?
Yep. Well, he's lucky because, as his father told us, he is the smartest man Dad ever met. So
but
he'll have to
he
rely
doesn't
on
have
that.
a marketable skill anymore, which means he must know that my only marketable skill was influence peddling.
Victor, Senator Mike Rounds from South Dakota tweeted, X'd, commented, he has reintroduced the Promoting Agriculture Safeguards and Security Act, legislation to ban individuals and entities controlled by China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea from purchasing agricultural land at businesses located near U.S. military installations or sensitive places. And Victor, your thoughts on that, but also I wonder, should there not be also some kind of national security eminent domain that takes these lands that China has already bought near U.S. bases and just boots them out, but in the good old USA buys them out while they boot them out?
Gee, you mean we're going to argue whether the communist Chinese can say they've suddenly become farmers and they want to buy a bunch of farmland right next to a Minuteman III missile site or one of our biggest Air Force bases? I mean, that's a no-brainer, right? But only in America would we think it's controversial. I think the whole theme of the Trump administration has to be reciprocity, reciprocity, reciprocity. We'll know if we're on the right track if we always ask ourselves this question: would they let us do what we're doing for them? Can you go to China and can you buy, if you're a big capitalist, can you go buy, 5,000 acres next to a Chinese submarine base, Air Force base? The answer is no. You cannot. You can't do it in Russia either. So why would we allow that here? Same thing with the tariffs. If they have an 8% tariff, we'll have an 8%. It's a very good policy to have because it's not provocative. It just says that we don't really want to do this. We just want to live and let live. But if you're doing this to us, then we're just going to mirror image you and apply your standards to yourself. So if you're Canada and you want a 258% tariff on butter, then we'll have one on your butter. And just make it equal. Same thing with Mexico. If you're running, as I said last session, if you're running $260 billion in cartel profits and remittance profits and trade surpluses, then we're going to have to try to find a way to get that back to make it equal, not to our advantage. So it's very simple. Just don't buy farmland next to a military base and we won't do it to you. But if you do that, then maybe we'll do it in your country. And if you won't let us do it in your country, then we're not going to let you do it here.
Amen, brother.
It seems so simple, doesn't it? It's so.
It does.
That's all Trump is. He's right about it. It's a return to normalcy.
Well, we have a couple other things. We're a little truncated here today. We got to keep Victor alive by not.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for the well-timed cough, my friend.
I got to get some tape to tape these eyes open.
We're going to ask you about John Kerry's hijinks with Iranian terrorists and a scandal of what are called pop-up nonprofits. And maybe if we even have a little more time, some legal action being sought on Biden, Joe Biden's cognitive decline. I mean, who the hell was signing all these executive orders when he was still president? We'll try to get to at least two of those things when we come back from these important messages. We're back with the Victor Davis Hanson show, recording on the 10th of March. And this show's up on Thursday, the 13th. Victor, I wrote a note here. Wouldn't you want to see John Kerry prosecuted? The headline: Obama Justice Department, John Kerry systematically derailed FBI probe of Iranian terrorists while pursuing nuclear deal. This is according to whistleblowers. I guess we shouldn't be surprised.
Trump first administration, you would see pictures of John Kerry meeting with his Iranian foreign counterpart in Paris and places where he was still doing de facto diplomatic work in preparation for the Biden administration, where he became, I guess he was climate czar or something. He really thought in those years that he was going to be secretary of the world, or he was going to be the UN Attorney General. Not Secretary General, or at least he was going to get a Nobel Prize. And he's always been that way. He's always underperformed. He had these enormous ambitions. I mean, he married a heiress, and then he had some affairs and divorced her. She passed away. And then he married the heir to the widow to the Heinz tomato fortune. After I think her husband, John Heinz, a senator, was tragically killed. And then he was flying all over the world in his wife's private jets, the company jets, while he was lecturing us about our carbon footprint being too large. But he really wanted to say that he was the person who got the Iran deal ratified and made into real action. And he was willing to do anything with that. And he did. He did anything. And if somebody came to him and said there's Iranian agents in the United States that want to kill a president, he just said, stop it. I don't want anything to get in the way of my ambition and my agenda. He's always been a very selfish person.
Victor, you cross paths with a lot of people through life. You never crossed paths with him, did you?
No, I had to give a lecture in Boston, though, once, and I wanted to go see where he lived. So I walked, because I thought he was a man of the people. It was one of his many homes. Quite impressive.
Yeah, he's.
No, I haven't had that wonderful experience yet.
There's
certain things that I hope I don't have to do before I die.
Yeah.
One of them is to meet John Kerry.
Okay.
He lost me when he was testifying about how horrible Americans were in Vietnam, and he kept saying Genghis for Genghis Khan. It's the worst atrocities since Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
Okay, young Kerry, we understand that you're an authentic.
John O'Neill, who took him down essentially with those.
I met John O'Neill. I've had dinner next to John. I like John O'Neill.
Oh, he's a great guy. He came on a National Review cruise, and then I had him as a speaker on a cruise. Just a real.
Remember that debate they did where he just destroyed John Kerry?
Yeah. God bless him. Special American. All right, let's get into Biden here, Victor, with his cognitive decline. And the Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey has asked the Justice Department to investigate whether White House staffers exploited Joe Biden's cognitive decline and issued far-left orders at the end of his presidency without his knowledge. The premise being, if this indeed happened, then what is the validity of this executive order, that appointment, that what do you call it when you let a murderer off death row? I can't think. I'm given my own cognitive decline. Pardons, presidential pardons, are they legitimate? If Biden himself, if evidence can be found that he actually didn't do it.
It became a very important point when we learned that only one of his signatures was unique, that they were all the same and they were done by an auto pen. But it just amplified what Speaker Johnson said when I think one of the last weeks that Biden was in office, he went to see him about canceling liquid natural gas terminals for export in Louisiana, his home state. And Biden said something to the effect, "I did? I don't think I did." "Yeah, you did." "You mean I canceled them?" "Yes." "I canceled these gas terminals?" "Yes." "I don't remember." And he didn't. And so they were just signing things, I suppose. You get the little elves that were working in the White House in the elf room. And I think it was like Obama said. You remember that famous clip? They said, all these little Obama fans said, would you like a third term?" "Well, I like a third term. I can just stay down here in the basement and work out. And I call in once in a while and just, not be identified or have to meet people, just order and everybody'd run the country." That's exactly what he did. He tipped us off. He and Michelle and the Obama crowd, they had a captive, a waxen effigy.
He should be questioned by many reporters over the last 2 weeks or so, given the collapse of the Democrat Party. But Obama seems to be in hiding. So,
well, it'd be hard to find him. You'd have to go to the Chicago mansion, and then it'd be like chasing a billiard ball, going back and forth on a billiard table. No, he's at the $15 million estate on the coast, the Martha's Vineyard pad, with the 2,000 gallons worth of propane. Oh, no, we missed him. He's at the Colorado, Washington mansion. Oh, yes. No, he's in his new home on the beach at Hawaii. And you'd say, no, he can't be there because he said that global warming would inundate all of our shorelines within 10 years. So why would he buy something like Martha's Vineyard on the coast or Hawaiian on digs on the beach? There was another weird story about Obama that apparently a secret woman claimed that a Secret Service person assigned to his Hawaii mansion before he'd actually moved in was partying and inviting her to come over. And so the Obamas weren't there yet. I don't know if that's true or not, but that was
the Daily Mail has been running a bunch of stories about the frailty of the man. We're not here to discuss these things with the Barack Obama and his wife.
He has a third-party visitor, right? Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. All right,
I always thought, I thought that his lifestyle would be, after he left, there would be an effort to pursue a different type of lifestyle, but he wouldn't be in the media. And then after about 10 years, when his kids were grown up, he would just do what he wanted. Maybe we're reaching that point.
It's America that we suffered through this.
Would you think it would be wrong that my wife and I are living alone here in our house, and I just invited some friend of mine, guy, and he just moved in with us? What? Are you suggesting anything untoward about
that? Spice things up a little bit. No, okay, Victor.
I don't think that would be the right term. Spice.
The wrong kind of spice. Victor, this may be too much, and I hope it's not too in the weeds for our listeners, but you and I are both very involved in nonprofits. You've been on the board you work for one, you've been on the board of the Bradley Foundation. I work for a company, Amphil, that helps nonprofits. I've been on the board of nonprofits. And this is titled The Scandal of Nonprofits. And Lizzie McDonald, who I assume many of our listeners know, she's a reporter, terrific reporter at Fox Business News. She put this comment up on X the other day. Give me a minute here to read some of this. She writes, "This is disturbing. Biden and Obama Democrats created a new beast, the, quote, pop-up nonprofit shell, end quote. They suddenly launched to take in your taxpayer money, supposedly for things like climate change and illegal immigration. It's a major front for taxpayer abuse with accusations of grift growing by the hour. This is, again, Liz McDonald writing. Never saw it like this in decades, covering IRS and taxes. Check out the tax returns for one of these pop-up NGO shells, the Climate United Fund, which got the biggest nonprofit grant in history out of Biden's massive climate slush fund. It got $7 billion. I'm not going to read through all of this. Not a lot of money spent. A fraction of the $7 billion is spent. By the way, part of that fraction was given to Stacey Abrams. It says there are these forms called 990s, right, that are tax returns for nonprofits. This slush fund has little to no details of how much its officers get paid that you typically see on NGO 990s. In fact, virtually no details. Red flags that it's a shell. Victor, this is bad in its own right. And of course, now ideology has marched through nonprofits really aggressively. Any thoughts on this as we close out today's show?
It's exactly what DOGE is supposed to find out. It's fraudulent. And there's a kind of a pattern to it. And that is mid-level or low-level functionary in government, when their tenure expires, they go to work for an NGO. Usually it has something to do with diversity, equity, inclusion, green transformation, solar power, something like that. And then they master it. They stay there a year or two, and then they get smart and say, you know what, I'm going to make my own company. Sheldon Whitehouse's wife, we talked about that. She was doing this too. She had a clearinghouse of money that he voted for. I think she distributed $14 million and shaved off $2 million for herself or something like that. And then they understand how it works, so they set up a dummy company, and then they can say, it's not for me, it's for the cause. And they usually do it in the last year of an administration. So Biden is losing, he's going to lose. Harris comes in after she loses. Then all this money is gold bars on the Titanic, I think they called it. Just throw the money to these NGOs who are going to distribute. Stacey Abrams was giving people, what was her, she was on TV the other day, or she was in the news, and she said that she could justify all the money. She went from $100 in her nonprofit to, was it $2 billion?
$2 billion. Yeah.
What? Yeah, $2 billion. And she said she was doing this so that the poor deserving people of Georgia would have green refrigerators and appliances, not Obama phones, but green, so they could have all new. To think of that. What does green mean? It means you go into Home Depot and every single refrigerator there by law has to have the power usage for the whole year. And then you go and say, we're going to buy the one with the lowest, and it won't make a bit of difference, but it will justify the scam. And then we'll just start to distribute these to our crony friends and take a huge overhead and make, $700,000 or $800,000 for ourselves per year. That's what they do. And how can you be for that when DOGE is exposing this every day? And, that's not that they don't know this is going on. When the President of the United States starts listing people 130, 140 years old that are getting this and that, Rubio shows you that, I think Rubio just came out today and said 83% of USAID will be gone for good, and the residuals will be under his control in the State Department. But it's what broke us. And it's so many brilliant political philosophers and political scientists from antiquity on have warned us that once you turn over revenue to unelected bureaucrats that are not accountable, not audited, they expand and become more powerful than elected officials. And you'll never stop it. I don't know if Elon Musk, the left is very worried because they've got a guy who created the first EV viable car and really is synonymous with EVs. And he saved NASA with SpaceX. He reinvented the whole social media with Twitter, and he's got one of the biggest artificial intelligence companies. And then they think he's in charge of cutting this waste, fraud, and abuse. And then they've got Trump, and Trump's basically go to it. He's not going to ankle bite him. And that combo, it really gets them afraid because they're going to find stuff. I think they're just going to keep finding things that are shocking.
Yeah.
And keep the Democrats off. You get the impression that the left has been just stealing money from the government for years. I don't mean money. I mean hundreds of millions, hundreds of billions.
Yeah.
And
well, I think America has the stomach now to care. Which we discussed on the last show, the polls following Trump's speech to Congress. I mean, Americans are not indifferent to this anymore. So God bless them. So Victor, we're gonna round this out today. Again, we're cutting it a little short so our friend can take care of himself. I want to thank our listeners who take the time on Apple to rate the show 0 to 5 stars, and practically everyone is giving Victor 5 stars. Some are actually leaving comments. I'm going to read 2 comments. This first one is titled Colonel USMC Retired. Dr. Hanson's insight, analysis, and commentary is just so spot on. I was privileged to have served for almost 4 decades, including a tour as a professor at the Air War College. And throughout that time, I never encountered academic acumen like his, a true American treasure that should be on the top of each service's visiting lecturer list. And this is signed by DAO 1217. That's pretty cool. And
Thank you.
One other from Ali _44, titled American Treasure. Victor is an American treasure. Whether he's talking about politics, history, or movies and music, he always tells it like it is. I also love when he reminisces about his father, telling him how great the Swedes and Swedish steel are. It reminds me of my proud Swedish grandmother who lived to be 110. She was the same way. Quote, the Swedes have the biggest brains, she would tell me. They have the most innovative ideas. As an aside, I was wondering if Victor could recommend his favorite Civil War books and authors, as well as what's on deck for his own next book. I think we should bring up the Civil War books on another podcast. That would be a pretty good idea.
To do that.
Yeah.
The most stylishly written and engaging is Shelby Foote's. There's no footnotes in it, but it's a literary history of the Civil War that was pretty good. And I can go through all of them.
Yeah, what's the book here? Again, I'm sorry, Victor. The Greek book you have plans to write.
I was going to, well, the problem with getting influenza A is that all your plans, you think you're never going to get over it. So after 5 days of this 101 temperature, I've had all these people, they say, what happened to you? They write, are you going to do this tonight, Fox tonight? You're going to do Newsmax? You haven't written any. I have over 400 emails I haven't even looked at. So the last thing on my mind is a biography of Epaminondas. And there's not a lot of Epaminondas fans out there who are saying, Victor, if you don't write that biography of Epaminondas, I'm going to be really upset. So and there's so many classicists out there. I'm sure somebody's writing one anyway. But if I can get this book, another thing is I have a very tight, I just started on it for basic books, The Return of Trump or The Recalibration, whatever the title we've come up with. But I was going gangbusters, and I haven't been able to. Every time I start to type, my head goes like I'm on a yacht or something.
Victor, you should be aware that in 2 minutes your head will be on a pillow. I need to thank people who thank me for writing Civil Thoughts. That's the free weekly email newsletter I do for the Center for Civil Society, where we are trying to strengthen civil society. What's Civil Thoughts? It's a newsletter. It comes out every Friday. It has 14 recommended readings. It's free. We do not sell your name. There's no strings attached. I know you'll enjoy it. So go to civilthoughts.com and sign up. Go to The Blade of Perseus, victorhanson.com, and subscribe. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We will be back. I hope we will be back with a healthier Victor Davis Hanson.
Thank you
everyone.
for listening. I'm sorry if Sammy and I have missed some pods. We're going to try to make them up.
Amen.
But Sammy's in bad shape.
She'll
Sammy's
survive.
got a flat tire. Okay. We'll see you guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care.